This is the Precious Metals Briefing with Jerry Williams. Safeguard your money.
Welcome to the Precious Metals Briefing. I'm Tony Famino, again with Jerry Williams, the founder and vice president of American Precious Metals in Arizona. Today, we are going to discover how to protect your retirement during the COVID crisis and really even beyond the COVID crisis, because retirement, obviously, Jerry, is something that is on just about everybody's mind. Maybe if you're 20 years old or 30 years old, you may just begin thinking about retirement, but really everybody has to start thinking about retirement, and that also includes educating yourself on the options with precious metals, right?
Yes, very much so.
So what different ways can somebody like me or anybody invest in precious metals for retirement?
Well, there's a precious metals IRA that you can do. There's a number of different things you can put in there, but you need to find first a custodian that handles just that, just precious metals, not stocks or bonds or ETFs or things like that. Those are ways that you can put gold away for retirement. But what you should do, in our opinion, is to get the actual metal itself, whether it's in bars or coins, low premium bullion coins, through a precious metals custodian. And that's what they do.
Okay, so what you're saying is all IRAs are not the same. Precious metals IRAs are very specific. There's a certain way to do it that would be different than other IRAs. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, because the coins are held not in your possession, but they're held by a third-party depository where they would be insured against any sort of loss. And the gains on those metals would be deferred until you take possession of them at retirement. And so then you would pay income taxes on those gains.
I see. Okay, so let's start from the beginning then. If I'm somebody that it hasn't done this, but it wants to consider doing it, how do you start the process of a precious metals IRA?
Sounds a little exotic when you first start to hear about it, but there's basically only three things you need. You need a custodian, as I mentioned, that specializes in precious metals, and then you need a dealer such as ourselves where you can actually purchase the metals, and then you need a trusted and insured depository that'll actually hold them. So you need those three items. First thing you do, of course, is if you have an existing IRA or a 401k, by the way, the 401ks do not invest in precious metals. They have their own guidelines. Usually it's company stock or something that's determined for you. What you really want is the self-directed options where you decide. So you have to first then reduce the items in your existing IRA or 401k to cash. Then you have to instruct that custodian to transfer the cash to a precious metals custodian.
What is the definition of a custodian? Who is a custodian, or what would be an example of a custodian?
A trust company, a fiduciary, like a bank, but not a bank. Banks are not custodians.
Okay.
They just hold the funds. They don't hold the metals. And so, they're obviously insured as well against any sort of loss or fraud. Once you didn't instruct them where to purchase the metal, then the funds go to the precious metals dealer, who then purchases the metal for you in your name and sends them to the depository.
One of the things I hear right now, I'm hearing you say this, and in our previous shows, and I've known you for many, many years, when you're talking about this IRA or a lot of precious metals investing, it's the idea that the individual is going to take more control over their financial future, as opposed to giving it to a mutual fund or to turn it over through maybe your employer or something. One of the big differences is that you have more control over, in this case, your retirement. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, that's why they call it a self-directed IRA. Mm-hmm. Now, there are certain guidelines that the IRS has set up so that you can't be misled into investing something that isn't proper. In other words, there are four precious metals that would qualify: gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. And so the purity of these metals needs to be established. So you can't be buying rare coins, foreign coins, bars that aren't pure, anything like that. So once you've met those guidelines, and any qualified dealer such as ourselves would not even try to sell you anything other than what it would fit. And the custodian knows that too. They have a list of approved items.
Mm-hmm. And so if somebody wanted to do an IRA, would they be able to come to you at American Precious Metals in Arizona, for instance, and you would say, here are some custodians that I have worked with? Or do you start with a custodian and then the custodian would then lead them possibly to you or to other people that are reputable? What step would be first?
Well, we can do the whole thing, actually. If you go on our website, apmaz.com, there's a tab there for IRA setups, and all the instructions are right there.
So it's one stop. So for instance, you could do it all. Not everybody could do it all, but for instance,
right.
you could handle all of the steps.
Download the forms and submit them to the custodian along with a check to open the account. I believe it's $50. And then you set in motion the transfer of your existing funds from wherever it is, a 401k or an IRA you have. They'll have to send the cash to New Direction Trust Company, as we've been using them for years. Very reliable, large company, and that's all they do. They just do precious metals IRAs.
What are the options with storing gold or precious metals in an IRA? Are they different than if I just came in and wanted to purchase physical gold?
Yes, IRS insists that they require actually that you store the metal in a depository of their approval. So you can't take possession of it and call yourself an IRA. It has to be stored in a third-party insured depository. And we've been dealing with one on the East Coast for many years. You get to determine which one you want. There's several, but the custodian has a list of them, and of course we recommend usually the same one. And the reason we do that, Tony, is when you decide to sell or take delivery, our major supplier is also the owner of the depository. So there's no delay if you decide to sell your coins for whatever reason. They're right there at the same spot. You sell them and your money gets issued right away.
Are there any time restrictions? Like if you open an IRA and you want to, as you mentioned, you want to take possession or you want to sell, is there a minimum amount of time that you have to wait to do that?
No, not at all. In fact, it's very flexible. There are no minimums, although I would recommend if you don't probably have $25,000, it may not be worth the annual cost to have the metals stored. There's no limits to how much you can store, though.
You mentioned the four precious metals. Is there one historically that's more attractive than others? Are they all basically the same when you're talking about using an IRA?
Well, most people go with what the definition of money is. Of course, is primarily gold.
I love this part too. So we always like to include this. What is the definition of money? If you're listening for the very first time, what is the definition of money?
Well, first off, it has to be a medium of exchange, which is pretty basic. But the most important one is it has to be a store of value. And we're losing ground with paper currencies right now because the value of them is depreciating almost daily. If you've been to the stores recently, the inflation in food prices is just astonishing, and it's just starting too. And it's not just in the U.S., it's worldwide now. Central banks of the world have decided that money can be issued free. There's no interest that is charged, and there's no restriction. There's no gold standards anymore. Credit is created at the stroke of a pen.
So when we think about buying the one or maybe more of the four precious metals, does it matter, or what should we be thinking about? Should it be gold? Should it be palladium? Should it be silver? What types of considerations should we take today in today's market, in today's economic situation? Are there any that are better or worse, or depending on your situation, what might you consider with the four different classes of precious metals?
Well, I think you should put your money where the big money is, and right now that happens to be gold. All the major hedge funds, I could give you a list of names of people that you'd recognize, all the major banks, money center banks, and central banks, Poland, Turkey, Hungary, they've all been major buyers of gold to hold it in reserves and eliminating paper.
When we go back to the IRAs, and you're starting, maybe somebody's listening right now and they say, okay, I want to start this process. When they decide they want to reach out to a precious metals broker or a custodian, what questions should they be asking to make sure that it's a good fit for them and for their retirement needs? What are the questions they should be asking people like you or others that do this service?
Well, of course, we provide a list of what is qualified. And it could be U.S. coins, could be Canadian coins, could be other or bars. So you would determine, what price you want to pay and what your comfort level is. And of course, as far as the genuineness, since you don't actually hold it, you have to trust that the dealers knows what they're doing in providing you coins that are real. And then you need to know that your depository is insured, so that there's any case of whatever it would be, earthquake, natural disaster, whatever, your funds are safe. Now, the depository we use does something not all of them do, and they segregate your account, which means if you were to buy, for example, some proof American Eagles of this year, 2020, and you didn't want you didn't anything to change that, you wouldn't want them all mixed up with a commingled account. You'd want to at some point take delivery of those. Well, you'd get the same back. You get back the same coins that you put in.
Other than, as you mentioned, checking to make sure that the depository is insured and all of that, you want to approach somebody, a dealer that's been in business a long time, that has lots of clients that they've serviced, kind of the basic stuff when you're doing your due diligence, because retirements and finances are important. So you want to do the basics, right?
Yes, and these things are easily detectable. I mean, you can do online investigations of the custodian and the depository and American Precious Metals. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been around a long time. Even before American Precious Metals, I was with a number of other firms, including Merrill Lynch for a number of years. But anyway, we've been opening precious metals IRAs since we started in 1994.
So a long time. You've done many of these.
Hundreds, maybe thousands.
Yeah, right.
A lot of them.
Yeah. So what if people are considering investing in precious metals for their retirement plans? What is recommended? What are the guidelines? You say, I want 100% of my retirement funds in precious metals. Do I want 50%? What is the thinking?
Well, as an investment professional, which I was for a number of years, 12 years before I bought this business, you had to go by the prudent man rule. Which means you just can't go hog wild on any one investment. 10 to 15% is considered reasonable. However, one company I worked for, I had an ad campaign that said, put all your eggs in one basket, mm-hmm. and then watch that basket really closely. That's kind of frivolous, but anyway, it did work for a while.
Right.
Anyway, whatever helps you sleep nights, that's my philosophy. 10 to 15% doesn't seem like enough. Personally, it isn't for me. But I'm in the business, and I've been at it a long time, over 40 years. So, I don't trust paper, and so I want my savings to be, other than my homes, in metals.
Yeah, and so let's say I've got my IRA set up, and I've got my precious metals IRA, and I've done it for years and years, and then I decide it's time for me to take some of the money out. So I want to sell. As you mentioned, it's pretty liquid, but what is the process of doing that? Do they contact you? Do they contact the custodian? Is there somebody else? And what is the turnaround for something like that?
Well, the custodian is looking out for you in this regard, because you at some point you're going to have to take possession either of the metal itself or a cash equivalent, because the IRS requires you a minimum distribution once you reach age 70 and one half. So I'm in that boat myself, where I've had to sell coins I didn't really want to at a price that I thought was too low. But I have the option of taking that money, which I pay taxes on, by the way. That's why it's required to take the distribution, to pay the taxes at whatever tax bracket you're in. But you can turn right around and use that money to buy the coins back personally.
So the government is at a certain age; they want their money. That's basically what they want.
You've deferred taxes all those years. Now it's your turn to pay.
Yeah, now it's your turn to pay. So that certainly is applicable with precious metals IRAs. Also, that's where it's very similar to other IRAs and other retirement funds. That doesn't change. What are the tax benefits of doing this? Are there multiple tax benefits, or is it just the deferment, or what are the benefits tax wise?
Well, if you were to hold, say, this is why I like about putting metals in an IRA. If you hold an exchange traded fund or a mutual fund, for example, the taxes are different. When you sell the fund, the taxation is the same as if you actually were selling the metals, which is taxed at 28% as a collectible. We've been trying for years to get that changed so you could get capital gains treatment for metals, but they won't allow that. So you're paying a higher tax rate for physical metals than you would be for gold stocks. But an exchange traded fund is not treated as a gold stock. It's treated as though you actually had the metal. If you follow me,
Yeah. So
it's
whether
the same rate. Now, if you had the metals in an IRA and you're buying and selling and buying and selling, well, there are no tax consequences until you take the money out of that IRA, but it's taken out as ordinary income in the year you take it.
it's the year you take it, not the year that you buy it, that's the tax rate. Is that correct? Ordinary income?
That's correct. Yeah, your taxes are your gains and any income are piling up in there tax deferred until you take them out. And when you do take them out, whether it's required or whether it's your option, you're going to take it out at the tax rate. You're going to pay taxes on the rate, the bracket that you're in that year.
Yeah. So those are some of the tax implications. Are there other risks of investing in precious metals for retirement that people should consider and know about before they make their decisions?
Well, obviously, you're foregoing any income if you're buying precious metals because, in favor of long-term gains. That's a given. The other thing is, which I just told you I'm experiencing personally, is you wind up having to take a required minimum at a time when, say, the prices are lower than you would like, or even lower than you would pay. That's possible too. So you have to sell, regardless of what your profit situation is.
Mm-hmm.
You have to sell.
Yeah.
If you don't sell, let's just say the penalties for not taking your required minimum distribution are really heavy.
So what happens when, let's say you're 60 years old and you open up one of these precious metals IRA and then you hold them for 10 and a half years. And then, as you mentioned, the IRS, it's at age 70 and a half, requires you to take distributions. And as you mentioned, so one possibility would be, okay, I'm going to pay my taxes and I'm going to do, and then I might reinvest or start another, or reinvest and buy new precious metals into the IRA. What then happens? So you're 70 and a half years old. What are the next requirements of the IRS, age requirements that the IRS requires you to act?
No, every year, assuming there's still funds there.
Every year you have to do that.
Yeah, your custodian will figure out what your life expectancy is, and then, of course, your required distribution is based on a percentage of that, based on what you have left. Eventually, of course, you'll take it all out.
We are talking today about specifically also the current situation we're in, where we've never seen something like the COVID crisis and the economic impact of the COVID crisis. So when we look through that lens, Jerry, and we're saying, okay, we're considering, what you might see in terms of changes in strategies for precious metal purchasing or precious metal retirement. How have the last 3 months or so, if at all, changed or impacted the way that you view the precious metals IRAs?
Well, I think it's more critical than ever that you put money aside because the crisis is being met with unprecedented creation of money by not just our government, but others as well. And let's face it, it's for a good cause. I mean, people are out of work, businesses are suffering, they have to be rescued. You just can't just people starving. So having said that, though, that's why the precious metals are up, because whether the government is spending money that they don't have to fight a war or to fight an economic downturn, the fact is the money is being created without any backing. It's fiat money. And, historically, that doesn't end well. Eventually, it has to be paid off, defaulted upon. And so when you look at history, the only way to survive this is to buy something tangible. Real estate, diamonds, land, precious metals.
And historically, as we have discussed before, but it's worth repeating, all the time, is historically gold has been tangible and it's maintained its wealth compared to fiat currencies. Is that correct?
That's correct. And eventually, what will happen is you'll have a currency reset of some kind where things will get back to a level that people can begin to trust the currency again, and there'll be some sort of restriction on money creation. a gold standard, perhaps, something like that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
out there in the future. We don't know how far it is, but continuation of spending money you don't have can't go on forever.
Yeah, and that's why a few minutes ago when I mentioned, kind of what might be some guidelines in terms of your total portfolio with precious metals. You mentioned, you certainly want to look at 10 to 15%. You don't have to stay there, but certainly you want to consider a portion for that exact reason, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future, and you don't know if the fiat currency will gain more trust or lose more trust. So at least you're hedging. That's always the term that I hear with precious metals. You're hedging, some type of an insurance, correct?
Yes, and there is no other currency that I know of where you could go for safety outside of dollars. In fact, when you look at the rate of currency exchanges right now, we are the strongest currency in the world. Other currencies are being exchanged for hours. So to use that tired phrase again, the dollar is the cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry. Yeah. And yet, we're running at an inflation rate that's going to be ruinous here in the next couple of years.
And if somebody wants to begin or open a precious metals IRA, how long does that take? I mean, what does the process take for where you are for American Precious Metals? Is it a couple days? Is it a couple weeks? Is it months? How long does it take to actually do the whole process?
It generally takes a couple of days because the custodian holding your current IRA needs to liquidate whatever assets are in there to cash. So the cash can be transferred to, say, New Direction Trust Company. Now, that's all they take is cash. So, you can't just say your stock or your 401k, those assets can't be transferred to New Direction. They have to have cash.
Jerry, I always like to conclude with one of the favorite quotes you always tell me, and it's from the Wizard of Id.
Yes, the Wizard of Id says, "He who has the gold makes the rules."
You've been listening to the Precious Metals Briefing with Jerry Williams. To learn more about safeguarding your money, go to apmaz.com or call 800-522-GOLD.